Welcome everyone to German Tool Reviews. Today we have the Hazet 166N Assistant. For those that don't follow the channel, this is the same unit that I've restored in a 6-part series of videos. My best estimate is that this unit was built in the mid to late 1980s. The current incarnation of the 166N is nearly identical to this model, but I will point out a couple of differences as I see them throughout the review. First, let's get into a little bit of history on the Hazet Assistant. While researching the Assistant, I was surprised that there was not a definitive source out there that I could find on the history of the Assistant or even identification guide for the many models that have been released over the past 60 years. I'm sure there are more knowledgeable people than myself on the history of the Assistant, but all this knowledge is probably stuck in some old-timer's head or scattered across the thousands of forum pages that are out there on the Hazet Assistant. I'll do the best that I can, but feel free to point out any errors or omissions. The earliest documented mention of the Hazet Assistant I could find is from the 1954 catalog. Here's a translation of a couple of selected sentences from the original description of the Hazet Assistant. The Hazet Assistant is a new top product in the Hazet sales program, as a mobile tool and material trolley for panel beaters, auto electricians, upholsters, painters, filling stations, and nursing homes, as well as for industrial workshops and other workshops. The upper table serves to deposit parts and materials, and the right tool is always within reach. No damage of sensitive surfaces by the Assistant because it is all around equipped with elastic bumpers. 4 fully rubberized double wheel bearing rollers, 2 fixed, 2 steerable, allow for easy handling. This instance in the 1954 catalog is for the 160 model. The identifying feature of the 160 is the single intermediate tray. All of the early Hazet Assistant models did not have posts that could be folded down and were always in the upright position even when the trays were collapsed. The 160 is quite a rare model as it was only available for a couple of years. The accessories available for the 160 included a stool and lamp, which could be placed into one of the knobs on the end of the post. If we pull the original 1953 patent DE 949640, we can see the original concept for the Assistant and how much it evolved before the final production unit was created. I wonder if this prototype is still around sitting in someone's basement waiting to be discovered. In the 1958 catalog, the Assistant was listed with 2 new models, the 161 and the 162. The 161 model appears very similar to the 160 model, with the exception of blue and black knobs as opposed to the 2 black ones that are shown in the 160 model. The 162 is the first instance of an Assistant with 2 intermediate trays. Appearing in the 1967 catalog, the 166 TS was the first Hazet Assistant model to feature removable posts. In this particular model, the posts can be removed and then inserted into holes mounted into the bottom tub. This was quite an innovation over the standard Assistant at the time, as it made the unit much more portable. Also appearing in the 1967 catalog was the 172 HD, which can be best described as a version of the Assistant that is permanently extended, along with wire cages on the front and back of the unit. Later in the 1976 catalog, the 171 was introduced, which was a slightly smaller version of the 172. Hazet maintained this Assistant product line until the early 1980s, when the line was revamped with a discontinuation of the 161, 162, and 166 TS models. Introduced were the 160, 162N, and 166N models. The 160, known as the Mini Assistant, is a much smaller and greatly simplified version of the Assistant. The 166N was the first model to have posts that fold down at 45 degrees to make the unit much more compact. This is the same unit we are reviewing today and is still in production to this day. As I mentioned before, there are some slight differences between the version that I have and the current incarnation, but we will get into that in a bit. The 162N replaced the 162 model, and the only enhancement appears to be the new 2-step system for extending the trays that is seen on the 166N. The 162N still did not have removable or fold-down posts. In the early 1990s, Hazet expanded the Assistant product line to include your more traditional tool trolleys. This includes the 177, 178, and 179 Assistant models. There are several variations of each of these, and currently no less than 8 versions of the 179 model. These tool trolleys are outside the context of this review, but maybe someday we can dive into one of these as they look pretty awesome. The current Hazet Assistant collapsible tool trolley lineup consists of the following: the 166N with the classic unit with fold-down post, the 162C, a larger version of the 166N that is sized to fit Hazet's modular tool system. The Hazet tool modules are too large to fit in the 166N. The 162C also does not have folding posts. Then we have the 166C, which is nearly identical to the 162C with the exception that the posts fold down, just like the 166N. And finally we have the 160ST, which is the mini version. So now on to the review of the 166N. As I mentioned before, this is an older model of the 166N with some recently replaced parts. The older versions use Continental tires, and the new ones use German-made Tente casters and wheels. With one side using stationary wheels, the other uses swivel casters with a locking feature. And these are not the cheap type of casters that just use a friction lock on the rubber. The locking mechanism actually locks the bearing in place, so once you have these engaged, this thing isn't going anywhere, especially when you have it full of tools. Since this is a toolbox, it is of course going to have a lock. The locking mechanism is a sliding bolt system that actually engages a bolt into the posts on both sides of the unit. It would take a massive amount of force to shear these pins off, and it is safe to say that something else would give first if someone was really trying to break into your box. The current model of the Assistant does come with a padlock, and I would suspect that it would be similar to the one that came with the 190L cantilever toolbox that I reviewed some time ago. The arms on this model fold down with a really interesting type of joint. The poles are cut at a 45-degree angle and secured with a socket cap screw and thread locker. The bolts are torqued in such a way that the arms can just barely rotate around the joint. Once the arms are in the vertical position, they must be locked. This is done by turning the black handles, which pushes a pin into the detent. I had originally thought this pin was spring-loaded, but after closer examination, I believe it is just machined in a way as to automatically retract once you start turning the post without tension. I bet the engineer at Hazet got a raise after they came up with that one. Hazet has replaced the type of plastic that they use for these handles over the years. As you can see on my older unit, originally it had a hard phenolic type plastic that I would equate to a billiard ball. This is one of the parts I replaced, and as you can see, the newer units have been changed to a plastic that is more resistant to chipping at the expense of being softer. There's always a trade-off when choosing these type of materials. If I had to guess, I would say that the new handles are injection molded ABS. Looking at the handles, you will notice that there is a small hole in the center. This is actually for a variety of accessories that are and were once available. The only accessory that is available in the 2017 catalog is the 161-9 window pane holder. I'm guessing the intended market for the glass holder is the people who do automotive glass replacement. There were numerous accessories that would go into these slots over the years. This includes the 161-5 lamp, the 161-8 glass holder, and the 161-20 tester holder, which was used to hold electrical test equipment such as meters. I wouldn't mind seeing Hazet bring back the lamp accessory, especially with the recent innovations in LED and battery technology. I use screws to reattach the black top tray, but in the normal production units, these will be attached with steel rivets. The top tray comes with a patterned PVC mat. It will come rolled up, so you'll need to place something heavy on it for a while so it can flatten out. Since this is PVC, it would be susceptible to many solvents out there such as acetone, but it should be fine with contact of most standard oils. If you ever do mess up this mat, you can order a replacement from Hazet, which is what I had to do with this unit. The top cover also contains small formed depressions in each of the four corners that I'm guessing was added to give the unit some additional strength. But I found that it has the added feature of using it to temporarily store very small parts and hardware. To open the unit, you are first supposed to lift the tray with the yellow stripe on the edging. Once the topmost intermediate tray is secured, then the top cover can be lifted and secured in place. The top tray and the bottommost intermediate tray are linked together using chains on each side that passes through the middle tray. Therefore, all the weight of this tray is carried by the latches on the top tray and through the two chains. I would keep this in mind when organizing, as to keep your heaviest stuff in the first intermediate tray and the tub. Getting a look into these intermediate trays, you can see they pretty much have the same layout, with the only differences being around the post with different hardware used. Slots on the side are used to insert partitions that are included with the unit. The older ones you will find are painted the Hazet blue, with the newer ones have a powder-coated black finish. My unit came with 5 of these partitions, so I'm not sure how many would have been included with this unit originally. Current catalog indicates that it includes 4 partitions for each tray, so 8 total. Replacements can be ordered in groups of 5 partitions, though. Each of the trays and the top cover include a rubber bumper strip that extends around the perimeter, which is to hopefully prevent damage if you ram it into anything, accidental or otherwise. Partitions are the same heavy gauge sheet metal that is used in the rest of the trays. I would say it's probably around 20 gauge. They definitely have a very snug fit in the provided slots and shouldn't be going anywhere once you get them in place. There are also small compartments in each corner that can be used for some supplementary storage, such as for hardware and other consumables. One thing to note is that these compartments would be accessible even when the unit is locked, so you wouldn't want to keep anything like money, gold, or the combinations to your safe in this area when the unit is locked. The reasons for these openings on the side is to access the spring-loaded latches that allow the trays to be raised and lowered. One thing that should be addressed is the perceived flimsiness of the intermediate trays. The reason that these appear to be loose is that this is necessary in order to maintain adequate clearance to prevent binding when raising and lowering the unit. Some of this that you see in this unit may be due just to old age because some of the joint posts are crimped. The only alternative to the plastic bushings that they used would be some sort of linear bearing system, which would add an extreme amount of cost to the unit since you would need 6 of them. Quality linear bearing to match the size of these posts would run you a minimum of $50 each, which would add another $300 to the cost of the unit. Putting linear bearings on this thing might be something I'll look into for a future modification. Another question you may have is this unit susceptible to tipping if heavily top loaded? I can say that because of the wide wheelbase, it would be very difficult to tip this unit with a static load. In classic mechanical design, an object will only tip over if the axial component of the center of the gravity falls outside the footprint of the structure. So I suppose if you strapped a very unbalanced load to the top, you could get it to tip. But most engineers would call this operator error. The mechanical designers looks as if they knew what they were doing. Here's something interesting that I stumbled upon by chance. The intermediate shelves on this unit fit 3 Ghidorah tool modules nearly perfectly. Normally that wouldn't be too interesting, but Hazet has their own modular tool system and they are too large to fit in this space. Hazet's tool modules are 342 by 172 millimeters, while Ghidorah tool modules are 310 by 157.5 millimeters. There is a small gap of about 10 millimeters with all 3 modules in. I have found that inserting 2 partition plates between the modules now makes the modules fit perfectly. If you want to use Hazet tool modules, then you would need to upgrade to the 162C or 166C trolley. Now I'm not sure if this is some sort of coincidence or Ghidorah specifically designed their tool modules to fit in a 166N. Only Ghidorah would probably have the answer to that question. I am surprised that all these tool makers don't get together and decide on a standard for these tool modules, as it would be beneficial to everyone since you can make your products available not just for people that own your tool trolley, but every tool trolley owner. If you don't want to risk damaging the paint on the intermediate trays, then I would suggest picking up some of these empty ABS tool modules that Ghidorah sells with part number 1500E-NL. I think I will pick up a few of these to put on that second intermediate tray. Finally, we have the bottom compartment, which I refer to as the tub. People have actually repurposed these to make grills and coolers because they are made of such a heavy gauge metal. This would be the place for all your larger tools and assemblies that either are too long or too tall to fit in the intermediate trays. It does have a couple of drain holes in the bottom, so it is not designed to be watertight from the factory. So now the question comes up, who would best benefit from this tool trolley? It is obvious that the intended market was originally automotive technicians. The trolley is intended to replace the traditional service cart without taking up as much space as a typical cart would use. One great thing about this design is that it can be compacted to fit in the trunk of probably any compact car out there. However, one thing you have to remember is that this unit is quite heavy. Even unloaded, it weighs about 25 kilograms or about 55 pounds. So once you put your tools in there, it could easily get above 100 pounds. So it isn't something that I could see someone lugging up and down the stairs every day. But I can still see it as a useful portable service cart for those jobs where you need just a little bit more organization and ease of transport than your regular toolbox would give you. For myself, I'm going to use this as a supplementary toolbox, possibly in another room where I'm constantly going back to the main toolbox for things. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that look at the Hazet 166N Assistant. Check out the link in the description below to the full review. KC Tool and Amazon affiliate links to this product are also in the description if you feel the urge to pick one up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.